G'day. If you saw my last video, I shared with you how I changed the cutting blade on my Makita Electric Lawnmower. Today I'm here to share with you my resolution to another problem I'm having with my lawnmower, cutting stripes into the grass. The reason behind it is actually quite simple. Basically, some people have been a little bit rough with the machine. If you have a look at the direction the wheels are pointing right there, they're not really facing in a straight line. Now, for the mower to mow in a straight line, it needs to have its wheels, all four wheels, pointing parallel with each other, give or take a couple of degrees of tolerance. But on close inspection there, you can see that that whole bracket where the axle mounts to has been bent, and the one over here on the right hand side of the mower, well, it's even worse. Now the effect on this is twofold. If we look at the lawnmower right down here from the front, you can see the right hand side of the lawnmower is actually lower than the left hand side, and this results in the lawnmower cutting stripes in the lawn. This is the effect of the lawnmower being banged into the tree trunks, dropped as it goes up and down the stairs. As a result, those axles are no longer in alignment. So what I'm going to do now is replace the axles, which will realign the wheels, and I'm going to share with you the whole process of how I do that. Here I've got the two new axles, and at first glance they look identical. You can see the stub axle here is the same size on both, and likewise at the rear there. The bell crank system is identical measurements front to rear. Don't be fooled though, if you put them next to each other, you can see quite clearly that one is longer than the other one. So the rear axle in this case has a wider track than the front axle, and so this one is the rear and this one is the front. First thing I'm going to do is remove the push rod that operates this bell crank here for the rear height adjustment. For this I'm using an 8mm ring spanner. I'll switch to the open end of my combination spanner. There's the nut. There's also a washer here. I'll place them there in the trolley so they don't get lost. And then I'm just going to take the weight of the mower and drop that push rod back, disconnecting it from the bell crank. And I'm going to do the exact same thing up the front here with the forward push rod. I'll remove that and take off the nut and the washer, and then I'm just going to flex that push rod out of the way and let the lawnmower drop down. Now I'm going to turn the whole thing upside down so I can access the bottom half of the mechanism. So it looks like there's not too much rocket science here. Got a little fairing here with maybe 3 or 5 screws in it. I can't quite see down in those holes, it's a bit dark. I imagine that there's screws in there, so there'll be 5 screws to take out here. Up the rear, looks like the axle is retained just by 2 screws and 2 little steel brackets. From what I can see, all of the screws have been slotted with both a flat drive and a number 2 Phillips. I've gone and grabbed my favourite Phillips head screwdriver. I'm going to tackle the rear axle first. What I'm going to do is pop these hubcaps off, both sides, and using a 13mm ring spanner, I'm just placing a screwdriver in and jamming it through that bell crank there to stop the axle from rotating while I undo the retaining nuts for the wheels. I'm just going to slip that wheel off. I'll do the same on the other side. Nothing complicated here. No left-hand thread for one side and right-hand thread for the other side. It's just nice and simple. Now I'll whip those two retaining screws out. Remove the retaining bracket. And the old axle just pops out, straight out. By placing it up next to the brand new bracket, you can see quite clearly the reason why the right hand side of the mower was lower. The rod has actually twisted. The stub axle is bent. I could take some time and try and straighten all of this out, although I think the amount of time required would be pretty prohibitive given the spares are readily available for this. I'm just going to drop that in there, reinsert that retainer clip. And screw it back down. I'll repeat that over here on the left hand side. The bell crank push rod is actually quite easily accessible over here, even with the mower inverted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reconnect that now. Remembering to reinstall the washer along with a nylock nut. I'll reinstall the wheel, making sure that all of the parts of the bearing are safely installed. The advantage of having that bell crank connected is that I can tension the retainer nut without having to jam a screwdriver in there. Hubcap back on. I'm going to remove this fairing. 5 screws in all. As you can see, the front axle is purely retained by the fairing, so this whole thing can slot out. Perhaps a little foolishly, I removed the axle without removing the wheels, but that can be quite easily done on the bench. You can see the amount of damage that has been taken by the old axle when you see it side by side with the new one. Again, remembering the bell crank goes to the left hand side of the mower, and once again I'm going to slot that push rod back into position, reinstalling the fairing. Reinstall the washer and the nylock nut. Rightio, let's see. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching.